If you ask anyone these days how they are, yikes, I'm in trouble today, right? Wow. Man, you guys are really eager to talk. Working me hard. I don't know about you, but if you ask anybody these days how they are, the most likely words that I hear are phrases like, I'm tired, I'm too busy, I'm exhausted, overwhelmed, I'm fried. It doesn't matter who the person is, whether they're young or old, a person of means or a person who's struggling financially, parent, a professional, women or men. We're all overstretched and overspent, especially at this time of the year. It's like we're all tired. And the rise of technology, even though it's meant to make life easier for us, doesn't seem to help either, does it? I came across this old Time article from the 1960s. It was predicting the changes that would take place by the mid-80s about the reduction of work that all of us would be doing, and said that we would have too much time on our hands and something needed to be done. That they quoted experts in this field who went to a government subcommittee in the US on time management, and they were proposing cutting, work hours back, retiring people earlier, all these different things, because they kept saying people are going to have too much time on their hands. What are they going to do with it? Almost 60 years after this article was written, I have never met someone who has said to me, I don't know what to do with all my free time. Anybody have that problem? Because I'd love to chat to you. You see, our lives, aren't they? They're dictated by these overfilled schedules. We dart here, we dart there, we grab fast food on the way. There is this frenzy of activity, a desire to be productive and more efficient out of the 1,414 minutes of each day, 168 hours a week. Even young children are getting maxed out now with more and more demands on their schedules by more and more expectations of their parents. It's no wonder, isn't it, that children are having an increasing amount of anxiety and emotional problems as well. We're not modeling this very well to our kids. We stay up too late, we rise early, we fuel ourselves for the day with numerous coffees and pies and Red Bull in the afternoon, all designed to just fuel us to keep on going and be more productive. We stop at the grocery store and you're at the counter and you want to seize every moment, make sure it's productive, so you count how many people are in the line, how many things are in their trolleys, whether they kind of pass in that kind of aisle you're meant to be in. You kind of ascertain whether they're going to pay by check or by cash or by credit card, and is this a PayWave line, and do they know how to use PayWave, or are they going to be one of those annoying people that has to call somebody and you're still waiting? We try to fill every single moment in order to be more and more productive. And in the midst of all this pressure to produce at ever-increasing speeds, with this constant need to always be available and accessible, we hear this deep longing cry from our souls for rest. And yet the rest that we tend to experience isn't restful. It's this entertainment, it's this active leisure. We sit in front of a box and we kind of watch all this stuff, but we go to bed tired, and we wake up exhausted, even after we've slept, and we haven't rested. And I'm using the word we because this is a problem for me too. My life is crazy busy. I don't say that to boast or to brag. I'm not trying to win a contest, even though I know in our society to say you're really busy, it's almost like this competition, this kind of badge of honor that we wear. I don't think God sees it that way. I'm just trying to describe the way my life feels most days, and I'm not proud of it. Thankfully, I have a board that's telling me I need to take a day off, and I'm learning, albeit very, very slowly. You see, a series about faith goes to work is obviously about work, but to work well, we need to rest well. Good work comes out of good rest. That's why God built a day he called the Sabbath. And as we learn to keep the Sabbath, I think we learn to manage this primary resource that we have called time. And what I'm learning in my experiences right now is this may well be the most difficult and urgent message for many of us here, because it addresses and pushes back on this relentless 24/7 need to produce at every moment society that we're living in. The original idea for the Sabbath goes back 4,000 years ago to when God gave Moses the Ten Commandments on Mount Sinai. At the time, the lives of people tended to just be around these routines and cycles and phases of the moon. So it was annual and monthly and daily cycles. It was natural for the people to get up, when the sun came up, and to go to bed when the sun went down, and to change the way you work in winter to the way you work in summer. But in the midst of that, God spoke about a Sabbath. Nobody in the world, as far as we know, had a 7-day week at the time. And definitely there was no understanding of a seventh day having no work. So this concept was wholly different to other cultures. But God is upfront with the faith community that this is the way he wants his people to live, to take a day off. In fact, he wrote it in the 10 Commandments. And it's number 4. It's not like a tack on at the end, like some afterthought. Oh, by the way, take a day off. This is like built in. It carries the same weight as do not commit adultery, do not murder. I want you to take a day off. And not just for you, but your whole family and those who work for you, even your livestock, your machinery, the things that you do to produce. It's almost like extreme. That's what we read. Remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, special, set apart. You have 6 days a week for your ordinary work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath day of rest, dedicated to the Lord your God. On that day, no one in your household may do any work. And this includes you, your sons and daughters, your male and female servants, your livestock, and any foreigners living among you. Now, your response might be, well, this is 4,000 years ago. They could afford to take a day off. They had all this time on their hands. They're not a society like we are that lives 24/7. And if that's your response, you've probably misunderstood this original context, because these people worked every day in order to put food on their table. If they didn't work, they didn't eat. There was no countdown around the corner to go and get some supplies. So when they heard the words, take a day off, I'm guessing not only did they go, what? Where does that idea come from? No one's doing that. But also, are you kidding me? How in the world, God, are we meant to do this? I think some of us, I can feel this way as well. So when most of us are here, this idea, we can have this negative idea in our mind, a bunch of rules, do's and do not lists that kind of grow that some of us might have experienced before. Rather than this idea of a kind of a spa for our souls. Something that causes us just to rest and to realize again who we are. As Jesus reminded us, the Sabbath was made for people, not people for the Sabbath. This is not about all these rules and regulations. This is about what we need and what is beneficial to you and me. So over the next 25 minutes or so, I want us to look at 3 ways, 3 reasons Sabbath is needed and why it can be like a spa for our souls. Here's the first one. Sabbath helps us look up. In Exodus 20, the passage I just read, we read about the need to remember the Sabbath, and we're given a reason. Goes on. Here's the reason. For in 6 days, the Lord made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and everything in them. But on the 7th day, he rested. This is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart as holy. In other words, Sabbath helps us look up. It's rooted in creation. God worked on different days. Day 1 he made, day 2 he made, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, and then he rested. And we read, on the 7th day, God had finished his work of creation, so he rested from all his work. And God blessed the 7th day and declared it holy because it was the day when he rested from all his work of creation. And I think the idea behind this is we mimic God in order to remember that we're not God. In his book, The Rest of God by Mark Buchanan, the author writes this: "We mirror divine behavior only to freshly discover our human limitations. Sabbath keeping involves a recognition of our own weakness and smallness, that we are made from dust, that we hold our treasure in clay jars, and that without proper care, we break." You know, when I have a day off, I remember that God is God and I am not God. I'm a creature in desperate need of God. I have limitations. I burn out, I break down, I get sick, I suffer injuries. The Bible says we're made from dust, and from dust we're never too far away either. There's a story about a traveler that went to Africa many, many years ago, and he hired this group of carriers and guides, and it was this 4-day trip, but being from the Western world, he wanted to kind of like speed it up and maybe fit it into 3 days rather than 4. And so the first day they set off and they traveled many kilometers, and they went a little further than what was probably meant to on that first day. And the second day he rallied everyone up earlier than planned, and they set off going at a faster speed and working later that night. And he just thought, we're going to get there at the end of day 3. On day 3, he woke up and everyone else was still in their tents. He tried to kind of rally them out and tried to get to the destination, but they wouldn't move. These hired people that he had to guide and carry. And frustrated, he asked them, well, why aren't we moving? To which they replied, well, we went too far and too fast on days 1 and 2, and our souls need to catch up with us. This was the understanding that the people that he had employed had. Now, we can kind of debate that, but I think as many people, we feel disconnected, but we try to keep going and going and going, and our souls are way back here somewhere, disconnected from us in many ways, crying out for rest. Not only do our bodies get weary, but over the course of a week, our minds get fatigued. We get bombarded with information day after day after day at work, multiple screens crying out for our attention. We carry all these mental lists of to-dos not yet done, bills to be paid, emails not yet responded to. Our wills get fried. So many decisions to make. Which foods will bring me most pleasure? Which clothes will impress people the most? Which tasks will be most successful? Which people can I disappoint? We choose 2 majors at university simply because we can't choose between them. And we fail to rest. And when we do that, we begin to pay the consequences. I had a coffee with a guy over at McCafe this week, and he told me how he had just developed alopecia areata. Is it the hair loss? And he said it had come for him out of the stress and anxiety that he was going through in life right now. And I could relate, because just a couple of months ago I had developed shingles, presumably from the same issues. Many of us can understand this from just health challenges we're facing right now. You might remember this article that was on the Stuff News feed last month. Miwa Sato, who worked at a broadcaster headquarters in Tokyo, logged 159 hours of overtime. It took only 2 days off in the month leading up to her death from heart failure. And as people looked at the reason why she died, the Japanese word they used was karoshi, meaning death from overwork. And she's young. But we're not meant to go at this pace. We're not meant to be trying to squeeze in every kind of moment to be productive. We need to realize that we are not indispensable. God is God, and we are not God. God took a day off. He didn't need to take a day off, but I think he's mimicking something for us to follow. It's like when my daughter Arwen was a toddler. She needed to sleep. She really needed to sleep. And Robin and myself would try to help her, probably bad parenting, but we would lie down next to her, kind of take turns of this to try to help her realize what it looks like to sleep. Of course, we ended up probably falling off to sleep and she was still wide awake, but we were trying to mimic what she needed to do. I think this is what God's doing here, showing us that we need to nap. We need to rest. As we keep Sabbath, we begin to realize how many things we're just not in control of, regardless of how many hours we work. Can't control the weather, can't control seasons, we can't control people's attitudes. Even in business, you might think your success is due to your hard work, but You can't control the economy or the decisions of customers. And if you're really honest, a lot of your business success is probably that chance meeting or the advice you received, that seasonal break you got. Ultimately, it comes from God and His graciousness. As we take a Sabbath, we're effectively saying, God, I need you to take care of me and my family and my business, my work. I'm trusting that you, God, are the one in charge. So the first reason we keep Sabbath is to mimic God in order to remember that we're not God. Not only does Sabbath cause us to look up, Sabbath also causes us to look back. When we read about the Ten Commandments, we can read about it in Exodus, like we just did. We can also read about it in Deuteronomy. Same call, 10 Commandments are given, need to take a day off. A different reason, though, is given from Exodus. Back in Exodus, that reason is about creation. Because God rested, we should rest. Here in Deuteronomy 5, there's a different reason given. So after it says, observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, goes through and it says, remember that you were once slaves in Egypt, but the Lord your God brought you out with a strong hand and powerful arm. That is why the Lord your God has commanded you to rest on the Sabbath day. So Exodus grounds the Sabbath in creation. Deuteronomy grounds it in liberation. Exodus remembers Eden. Deuteronomy remembers Egypt. In Exodus, we mimic God and we remember that we are not God. In Deuteronomy, we hold up this idea of divine deliverance. Exodus looks up. Deuteronomy looks back. Exodus gives us a kind of a theological reason. Deuteronomy gives us a historical reason. One reminds us that we are God's children, the work of His hands. The other, that we are nobody's chattel, nobody's slave. You see, at one time, the people of God were in bondage to Pharaoh back in Egypt. There was a day where they had no choice about their time. They just had to work. There was no rest. They had to do whatever their taskmaster told them to do. And if they chose differently, there would be a whip on their back reminding them that they could not make those decisions. It's like God saying, I don't want you to place yourself under these taskmasters anymore. I dealt with them. I freed you from Egypt with these amazing things that I did. I've now freed you. I want you to experience that freedom. Why would you resuscitate the taskmasters again? When they were in Egypt, there was this demand for more and more and more. The people made bricks so there could be storehouses, so Pharaoh could, store more grain. And so he needed more slaves and he needed more bricks and it's just more, this relentless cycle. I think a lot of our society is built on the same idea. We need more, and we need to be better than somebody else, and we need to make an impression, and we need to keep working and working and working. And God just whispers to us, it's not about more anymore. I just want you to rest. I didn't save you that you would be in bondage again to somebody or something else. I saved you because I want a relationship with you. And it's time for you and I just to talk and just to be. I don't love you because of what you do. I love you just because. And can we just experience and enjoy this relationship now? And yet so many of us, I think, are in bondage to these ideas of success, the materialistic culture around us, exploitive employers, parental expectations, or all of the above. And we try to squeeze and try to produce at every moment, and effectively we become slaves to that idea of production. But when you take a Sabbath, you're declaring freedom. You're saying, I'm not in bondage to anybody or anything else. I'm just being with God. I'm not going to be a slave to work anymore, but I'm going to rest. Sabbath invites us to stop and remember that we're not in bondage to time. We recall that our identity is rooted in the gracious, good work of Jesus. As we look back, we declare to the taskmaster that we are free. Mark Buchanan, in his book again, puts it this way. Sabbath is not the break we're allotted at the tail end of completing all our tasks and chores, the fulfillment of our obligations, because that never happens, does it? Rather, he says, it's the rest we take smack dab in the middle of them without apology, without guilt, and for no better reason than God told us we could. See, the first two reasons that I've grasped about Sabbath keeping is we need to look up. We mimic God to remember that we are not God, and we look back. We declare to the taskmaster that we are free. It's the third reason I want to give you. Sabbath also helps us look forward. We anchor our souls in this eternal rest. See, we're so bound up in time, aren't we? I check my phone so often to see what time it is, and if there's like 2 minutes before the next meeting, I try to squeeze as much as I can into those 2 minutes, and normally end up, late and, out of breath and not really ready for that meeting. It's insane, the things that we do. But there's another type of time, this kind of concept of eternal time. And Sabbath reminds us that this is not all there is. There's kind of a greater reality that we're part of, that something that Jesus is doing in our world. And it's why the early church, as they looked at the Sabbath, said it's actually not just about this day anymore. It's actually about a person. And this idea of Sabbath can be experienced in relationship with Jesus actually at any time. And they spoke about another rest. In Hebrews 4, we hear much about that rest. So there's a special rest still waiting for the people of God. For all have entered into God's rest, have rested from their labors, just as God did after creating the world. So let us do our best to enter that rest. And that rest can be experienced also now, not just something to come. And as we take a Sabbath, we almost like sit back and we have a glimpse of something bigger that's going on around us. A couple of weeks ago, I gave out those ice cream sticks. Coming out of, when I go with my kids to the ice cream parlor and we get those little tasters and we try something and we love it, but we realize it's just a little taster of something so much more that's coming. And I said our work is like that. It's a taster of who God is and what he's doing in the world. I think Sabbath has that same idea. It's a taster of a much bigger rest that is coming, a much bigger rest that we can kind of plug into. Mark Buchanan writes, Sabbath isn't eternity, but it's close. It's a kind of heaven. A well-kept Sabbath is this dress rehearsal for things above. And finding the rest of God now, we prepare for the fullness of God one day. In Sabbath, we anticipate forever. So not only do we look back or up, we look forward. And as we keep Sabbath, we anchor our lives in this eternal rest. Sabbath is more than just a day. It's this life punctuated with this rest of God that comes from relationship with Jesus. Now that it might be expressed in kind of daily rhythms for you, not just a weekly one. So for me, I have this daily devotion for me in the mornings when I've subscribed to this Bible reading plan, BibleIn1Year.org. It's put out by the people that do Alpha. It comes to my phone. It just gives me a chance to read God's word and to reflect on that, to just breathe and to pause and remember who I am. There's a whole bunch of things out there that you can use. In a couple of weeks, we're going to begin this significant study in the Gospel of Luke. And we have devotions that we've written that go along with that. We're just giving us this opportunity as a whole community of faith just to sit down and journey through the busy season together. But in the midst of that, to find rest. But it's also this weekly rhythm, isn't it? I want to give you just 3 takeaways where you can maybe put some flesh around this concept of Sabbath. And I'm on a bit of a journey here myself. I think the first thing, it has been for me, is to schedule a day a week for rest. Our schedules determine everything, don't they? So let's ensure we schedule this one in. Put it into your phones. For many of you, it will be Sundays. So schedule a time, together. And if it's a Sunday, it's a good time to gather together, like we're doing now, to worship, to remember who we are and who we're not. That the God we worship is always working, and today we don't need to, or some of us don't need to. For me, I choose a different day because Sundays is a big day for me, along with medical practitioners and various retailers and a whole bunch of other people that have to work on Sundays. But finding that day is really important. You see, even in the New Testament, Sundays was actually an active day for most people in society. It wasn't the Sabbath for most. They would gather together for services quite early, and then they'd have to go off to their jobs. But they found That not only is Jesus Sabbath, but they were still trying to find this place for rest. Many of them were still trying to do something and set something aside. I've met people recently who have changed their schedules quite radically. Somebody I heard recently had moved from the job they had to take on another job that was 4 days a week so that she could think, well, I'm going to set aside this day to kind of volunteer and do other things for my family. I'm going to have this day, and she had something else in her mind. And then she wanted to have a particular day where it was just restful. Doing radical things, compared to others, to simplify her life right down because it needed to be simplified in order to do that. It will mean preparing for advance. The day of rest doesn't just happen when you wake up in the morning. There's probably some things you need to think about ahead of time in order to safeguard that time. And today's probably just a catalyst for you and I to start thinking, what does this look like for us? Because I think a lot of us need to do a lot of learning around this topic, probably many conversations for us to be able to put something healthy in place. Not only do you need to set something aside, but the second thing is, do things that genuinely refresh you. This is not a day for all these oppressive rules that we might have heard about in the past. I think it'll look very different for one person from another person. We have to think about what refreshes our own lives and kind of step into that. As soon as there's a whole list of this is what it looks like, it lends to these oppressive rules. At Jesus' time, there was a whole lot of rules as well. This book here is called the Mishnah. This was all the rules that people had at the time of Jesus about what it meant to keep some of the commandments from the Old Testament. Huge amount of stuff. Number of these pages relate to the Sabbath. As the religious leaders try to say, well, this is what it means to keep the Sabbath, and you need to do that. And it just gets so tiring. I mean, just turning to this page here. It talks about how to boil a kettle. Because there's particular ways you have to do that on the Sabbath versus other days. And so it talks about, if you have hot water and you remove it from the stove, you can't put cold water into that because it would suddenly become work. And you kind of read through some of these things, and it's nuts. And it's oppressive. And you just go, enough with the rules. Sabbath keeping is not meant to be like that. It's meant to be restful. It's meant to be refreshing. And again, it could be very different to you, to me. But whatever it is, it's not meant to put us into bondage to some way of life. It's meant to be freeing and restful. So for one person, it might be a cessation of activity and taking a nap. For another, it might be gardening or going for a walk or playing some sport. For one person, it might be a lot of kind of, self-time away from everybody as an introvert. For others, it might be gathering together and having a big party with others and just celebrating a whole bunch of things. It's going to be very different. Some advice given to me recently was, eat the foods you love. Listen to music that moves your soul. Play a sport that enlivens you. Read books that refresh your spirit. Surround yourself with art and beauty. And have a nap. And as you do these things, give thanks to God for his wonderful goodness. Sit back and enjoy the fruits of your labor, just as God did when he took a Sabbath. Now, if you have a young family, this discussion's really hard, isn't it? How in the world a parent's going to take a day off and say to their kids, you need a day off as well? I'm still trying to learn how to do this one. We have 4 kids, between the ages of 5 and 10. A little easier for us now than it was a few years ago. Maybe it just means giving each other half an hour, and just trying to experiment with a few things. But try to change the way we do things in order to experience elements of rest. And maybe this is something we can discuss together and learn from each other into. Third thing, consider some technology-free time. Some of you have no worries about this at all. You're fine. Many of us, myself included, I think are addicted to our phones. We're talking about this in one of the sessions at Q on Thursday night. Robin has to remind me about this a lot because I can feel like I need to be constantly accessible and productive. She has to remind me that I am not God, and it's unhealthy for me to act as if I am in the place of God. That's why we need a Sabbath. That's why I need to have some technology-free time. Turn off the device and just remember who I am in Jesus. So why not try that? Maybe just baby steps, one night a week or for half a day, just turn it off. So the work doesn't define you. You don't have to always be checking on what's happening around the world. Just rest. Taking our faith to work means that we work from restful souls and bodies. And what I'm learning about rest is that this is a discipleship issue. I can rest because I realize life doesn't depend on me. I can rest because I have real beliefs about who God is and what God is doing as He works. And you shouldn't have to wait like I did for a board to tell you to take a day off. Each of us has choices about what we do in our time. We need to choose well and wisely. And I think this could well be the core need of our day. It's time for a soul spa. It's time for Sabbath. I'm going to invite the ushers to come up now and pass out the elements. If you're a follower of Jesus, I invite you to take a piece of bread, cup in your hands. Just hold it there for a moment. I'm going to pray after everybody's got these in front of them. And this is really an invitation for us, I think, to actually breathe, to catch a glimpse of Sabbath even now as we remember Jesus' work, and that I don't need to work. I don't need to earn anything. Listen to these words of Jesus from Matthew 11. Are you tired? Worn out? Burnt out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. They're good words. Let's take a moment to breathe. Have a hint of that rest this morning. Take these elements together. One of the early church leaders by the name of Augustine said, you, God, have made us for yourself, and our hearts find no rest until they find rest in you. I'd like to lead us in a prayer. After each statement, you might just want to say yes or no in the quietness of this moment. Jesus, I come hungry and tired today. Yes or no? Jesus, I've been trying to do life all by myself and working way too hard. Yes or no? Jesus, I am defined too much by what I have, by what I do, by where I live, by what friends I know. Yes or no? Jesus, forgive me for looking for identity and purpose in all these wrong places. Yes or no? So Jesus, I come to you and desire to find rest this morning. Yes or no? You are the one I need to know. You are the place where I need to live. You are what my soul is crying after. Yes or no? So once again, Jesus, I grab this relationship with you. I want to step in and enjoy this relationship with you. Yes or no? Jesus, I turn from these other places where I seek identity, and I take a step today to follow after you and your ways. Yes or no? And help me live from a vibrant and healthy life. Yes or no? Thank you, Jesus. Thank you for the life you invite us to experience. In Jesus' name, amen.